Hi there. So today what we're going to talk about is Conflux Scaffold 2, and essentially we're going to go from writing your greeting messages to minting an NFT. So in this example, we're going to create a new NFT and transfer to another address, as well as talk about how some of the metadata can be stored on IPFS. So there's different methods of storing NFT data. One can be IPFS, another could be Arweave. Some people like to just store it fully on chain as SVG. But for this example here, we're going to use IPFS because it's such a common method of uploading data. And we're going to talk about how, we're going to do it with Conflux Scaffold. So let's start. So in Conflux Scaffold, when you take the repo, Conflux Scaffold NFT example, there are essentially two packages. The hard hat package, which is used for compiling contracts and deploying contracts, and the Next.js folder, which is for the front end. We're gonna essentially start the front end because the front end is quite powerful for debugging any contracts that we compile and deploy through this debug contracts side of it. So when your front end is run, you should be able to essentially see this. But right now there are no contracts to debug, so that's why none of it's connected. So it says cannot connect to local provider. So we haven't started up our own hard hat chain yet as well. And for our target network and scaffold config.ts here, we are targeting hard hat, and we're not targeting any other network such as Conflux eSpace testnet or Conflux eSpace. So we're going to go hard hat here. We're going to talk about the new contract that we have in this folder. So hard hat contracts conflux nft.solidity. So this solidity file is different from the previous one in the sense that it imports a lot more libraries from OpenZeppelin. So OpenZeppelin has templated NFT contracts or functions that you can use for NFT contracts, such as ownable, ERC721, enumerable. And what essentially it does is take some of these contracts, functions that you can look at node modules to fully see what we're importing. And by taking it and applying it to the Solidity contract, we do not need to repeat some of these functions that are in these Solidity files. So when you flatten the Solidity file, it essentially takes some of these functions and puts it all into one file. But for example, safe mint here does not have any other sort of function within this file, but it essentially imports it from contract ERC721, which is essentially this OpenZeppelin one that we're taking it from. And then set token URI as well, because it's already, a lot of people already mint 721 ERC tokens, NFT tokens. We do not need to rewrite the set token URI function from scratch. And that's what we're importing it from, the ERC720 URI storage library here. So just quickly, what we're doing here is we have a function here where we're essentially returning a base URL, which is the ifpfs.io/ipfs. We're going to be attaching the CID to it, which contains the JSON file, which has the image as well as the traits of the NFT. There's going to be a transfer function, a burn function, and that's pretty much what this NFT does is it can mint, transfer, burn, and it has a counter. So every time you mint, this counter increments by 1. And so we're going to go npx hardhat compile. So we're in the hardhat folder here, and we're going to compile the contracts. What this does is it, creates a new folder above where essentially you can see the ABI. So if you were to look at the artifacts here, contracts, this JSON file, this ABI is what is used to interact with the contract that you've created and will soon deploy on hardhat. You'll also notice that when we deploy yarn hardhat deploy, that this ABI, so it says it cannot connect to any chain ID, so we'll have to actually set up the hardhat chain, so it would be yarn chain. This will set up a hardhat node that we can deploy our contracts to. So now that the node is set up, we'll do yarn npx hardhat deploy. And we're deploying this contract and we're copy and pasting this ABI to the front end. So if you look at this Next.js contract, so this deployed contract here, this 31337 is hard hat, and we're taking in the name of the contract as well as the contract address and the ABI. So if this was Conflux eSpace, this is the same way you would interact with it on the using Ethers library, where you stipulate the address, the ABI file, as well as connect it to your wallet so that you can read or write into that contract instance. So now that we've deployed it, we can look at our front end. So our front end now, we can go to debug contracts. Previously, we weren't able to open this because we didn't have our hard hat chain set up, and we didn't have our contracts compiled or deployed. So now with it deployed, you can see some of the basic functionality of what's in the solidity file. So for example, that token ID counter that we talked about, every time we mint, this should increment by 1. We can essentially see what the token URI is. So let's just say if we had a token ID 1, but there is no token ID 1 yet because we haven't minted any token ID. And then, we can transfer it. So this mint function, when we look at the front end side, we will be able to see that, it takes 2 arguments: which address we're minting to and the URL or URI. So this is the IPFS plus the CID. And so we can, quickly go in the front end. So now that we're out of the hard hat file, we'll look at the Next.js file and start looking at the app itself. So this page.tsx, from a folder structure perspective, is this main page. So you can tinker around, set up your front end page, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to grab some funds from the faucet because we'll need that for writing and minting NFTs. So then that is that. And then if we were to look at the header, so the header would be in the component side. This header, essentially, now we're looking at these ones right here. This My Conflux NFT, when we click on this header, it brings us to essentially the mint side. So we're going to look at My NFTs, page TSX, mint NFT button. So this is pretty important because Conflux Scaffold really simplifies how we interact with the contract itself. When we press this button on click, we go to the handle mint item function. This handle mint item function essentially looks at the contract, which we have essentially set up the instance here. So right here, we have the write contract and the read contract. The write contract is what we need for minting because we'll need to spend gas in order to mint a new NFT. And that's what we have here. So we have an await write contract async, which is what we have for here. And we're going to call what function we want to use. So this function name, we're going to use mint item. So this is essentially the same function name, mint item. And we're going to pass in 2 arguments: the address, connected the address, so what we're connected to, and the upload item path. So that's the URI with the base URI of IPFS plus the CID. And all that essentially allows you to mint the item. So let's go ahead and mint it. So when we mint it, it uploads the metadata to IPFS and it displays it here. So when you display, essentially Conflux Scaffold is using the read function to read from the contract what this is. So if we were to go to debug contracts here and we're to look at the read function, we can see what the token URI is now right here, ipfs.io/. That is what's been uploaded, which contains the metadata with the traits that you see here, which is white, black, 80, the message, I am comfy, I love Conflux, the owner, which is the connected address, and we have an ability to transfer it to someone else. So let's just take a look at where that is in the front end side. So in the front end side, we have a utils folder, simple NFT metadata here, where for each token that's issued, we can grab the metadata here and we're uploading it to IFPS. So IPFS, sorry, takes this metadata and uploads it, and it will look something. So I have the desktop of IPFS open, but it's not opening. But it'll essentially create a CID which the NFT will reference in the URI. So if we were to look at the IPFS API here, we're posting that JSON file into IPFS and returning a CID which we can use. So in this, my holdings here, we're displaying the contracts um, of what NFTs are being essentially, within this contract itself. So um, here we are changing so we have the contract name, your Conflux NFT, but we'll define that name as your collectible contract. And from there, we are essentially running the read function to see token of owner by index. We're going to connect the index and we're doing token ID 1. And then we're taking essentially the IPFS. So we're taking essentially the IPFS and displaying what that is. So we're displaying the token URI, we're displaying the image, we're displaying the all of that in the NFT card. So the NFT card with component, you'll have the address, everything that you're seeing right now in this little card here. So we're gonna do another mint so we can kind of get the idea of what's going on here. We've displayed another metadata, which is again in this card format where when we mint it, all that data gets using this component to display this card here. But essentially the crux is in that utils folder, NFT metadata, which is too hot for a t-shirt, which is this one right here, number 2. And for number 3, we can mint one more to grab the third image. So what's cool about this NFT is it's verifiably owned by this public address, which is myself, which is connected, and we can transfer it to someone else. And we'll show this functionality when we're in Conflux eSpace testnet, because I think that's a bit better use of how we're going to do it. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to delete the contracts from the front end side, so 3137. Recall that when we deploy it into Conflux eSpace, it won't be 31337. We're going to change our scaffold config so that our target network no longer becomes chains.hardhat. We're going to bring it and we're going to use essentially Conflux eSpace and Conflux eSpace testnet because these are the networks that we want to target. And for our hard hat, because there's no contracts that are deployed into the network yet, we need to change our deployment so that we deploy it into this network, Conflux eSpace testnet. Because we actually need faucet tokens, I'm going to essentially copy an M file here, which has a private key, which has the testnet faucet tokens. I'm just going to copy it into the hardhat folder. I'm just move it in and replace it. So that has the deployer private key, so that allows me to, deploy it on Conflux eSpace testnet. On the contracts here, because we no longer need these contracts, well, we do need them, but we're going to delete them and just start over the entire process so that you understand that it's the same process, but now we're deploying it into Conflux eSpace. So the compilement will lead to the exact same thing. So npx hardhat compile. So we have compiled the things. In the deployments, we're going to delete the local host deployment because we just want to see that folder for the Conflux eSpace side. So we're going to do npx hardhat deploy /-network and then the name of the network that we want to deploy to. So that's the Conflux eSpace testnet. So if we recall, that is in the hard hat config here. So we're deploying it to our essentially our RPC node, and we're gonna deploy it. Let's see what happens. So we're running this contract here. You notice that we're essentially taking the settings of the network that we're deploying to. So because we already complied, nothing to compile, but we should be deploying this now instead of in hard hat. It will be actually deployed on Conflux eSpace testnet. And there we go. Successful deployment with this being the contract address. I'm gonna copy and paste this to the Explorer because the Explorer will be a good use of just verifying that we have deployed it. So it looks like 38 seconds goes, we have deployed the contract. And now, once we've deployed the contract, we're gonna go up into our front end side and see how it looks. So we're gonna connect our wallet here. And switch from hard hat to Conflux eSpace mainnet. Right now we're on eSpace, but we want to go to testnet because that's where we've deployed it. We deployed it on the testnet. So we're gonna switch network, switch to Conflux eSpace testnet, switch network. To confirm on our Next.js side, we should see in the contract side that we have deployed it onto 71, which is essentially the Conflux eSpace testnet. So right here, I have some faucet tokens. I'm gonna mint an NFT. I'm gonna mint an NFT here because I wanna then transfer this NFT to another address. This time, because it's not hard hat, we actually have to spend faucet tokens, which is what we're gonna do here. You can see the very cheap gas fees, which is a feature of Conflux as a network itself, where a lot of the transactions are pretty much free in basis, or very, very, very nominal in cost. So we're gonna mint this NFT to myself. And we're going to essentially transfer it to another address. So we're at 685 now. We're gonna transfer it to this account called Raffle. We're gonna transfer it to it, and we're gonna send it. Again, when we send and transfer, we need to use gas. Here on MetaMask, it specifies what we're transferring, a Conflux NFT, and we're gonna confirm it. This should mean that when we look at our NFTs, the address which was minted to should no longer see this, and the other address will have the Conflux mascot with t-shirt. I'm gonna go ahead and mint another NFT for just this address so that when we switch between the wallets, you'll be able to see different NFTs. So I'm mint NFT here. So again, that NFT has disappeared and gone to the other wallet. So we no longer have the t-shirt NFT. We should see a different NFT. And we can look at the block explorer here. We can successfully see from this contract that A, we minted the item, B, we transferred it, and C, we minted another NFT. And here, this is no t-shirt. So we're gonna go ahead and switch our account. So we're gonna disconnect this one and we're gonna connect to the raffle account. We should see the NFT with the t-shirt. So there you go. So you've successfully transferred an NFT from one account to another, and you've minted it using what it is on IPFS by attaching the CID with the URI, which contains the traits of the NFT itself. So there you have it. This is Conflux Scaffold with the NFT feature. Feel free to play around with it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach us on Discord. Play around with some of this other features here, such as this IPFS upload, which essentially specifies the metadata that we're uploading onto to IPFS, as well as once you have the CID, you can play around and see what you're downloading from IPFS. You can debug your contracts, link up the Conflux uh, scan to this contract side of it so you can see what it is. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us for any questions. And that's it for today.